they die, and they are reborn. The idea that art and beauty transcends the time in which they are made. You might think of, what are some pieces? The Mona Lisa, maybe, right? That's certainly the what?
The Pietà.
The Pietà, right? The beautiful work of Mary receiving the Spirit. The work of Mary holding the crucified Christ in the Pietà. The ecstasy of St. Catherine. I mean, you think about these major pieces and that they transcend. Yeah, I was thinking of the work just now of the Night Watch, one of the great works of chiaroscuro, this work of light and darkness, where it appears that this regiment is literally having a candle, a light, shine upon them in the midst of their dark gathering before they go out. And how that light and dark speaks so eloquently and beautifully to some world that we know and yet are drawn into, even though we don't wear those clothes anymore, we don't send our men off at night, right? I mean, this isn't we don't have no experience of that, and yet that light and darkness speaks so eloquently. The light is in the world only for a little longer, was our lesson from Sunday. Right? The darkness will soon be here. A message in the midst of a lesson about a blind man who sees Christ for the first time. You see, there's a piece of this that's very important to an emerging conversation on theology right now. One of the great Anglican theologians that is alive today is a man by the name of John Milton. And he is reclaiming this ancient understanding, one that Paul Tillich has tapped into. But for John Milbank, everything has substance. Words have substance. Art has substance. Actions have substance. There's a film, some of you may remember, it's The Man Who Would Be King. Do you all remember that? Sean Connery, Peachy, there's a great Rudyard Kipling book. There's a line in there, and Sean Connery says, "When a man lies, he kills a small part of the world." This idea that our words and our actions, that everything we do has substance, and it is either reflecting God's glory and beauty, or it is not. Art is a revelatory sacrament of God's beauty. Just a few last quotes, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I experience painting. In a 1958 lecture, Tillich said, the picture was as Cézanne's aim, whatever material he used, mountains or beaches, individuals or groups, still lifes or towns. It is not astonishing that, for instance, that his still lifes embody, this is speaking of Cézanne, a cosmic power of being that is religiously far superior to sentimental Jesus portraits. We're talking about a man who painted mountains and portraits, who was the precursor in his later years to Cubism as he moved paint on the canvas. In 1965, in the book Ultimate Concern, Tillich wrote, "With regard to the visual arts, I believe the whole development since 1900, since Cézanne, has done a great deal to liberate Christianity from what I call beautifying realism, for which the German language has that wonderful word, kitsch. Such art does not express anything. It is simply a superficial prettifying where beauty as such is not called for." This wonderful image that if we would but open ourselves up to the holiness and the Spirit of God and the movement of beauty in the world, then that we might capture some part of that in the work that we undertake in our lives. So let me talk just a minute about what I do, which I don't do very much of because of my other job of beautifying the world, which is very different. I really felt called to be a priest very early on, and so I did not know really how to get through college. I was managing a retail store and was going to college part-time. I bombed out of the University of Houston and left before they asked me to leave. And I realized I had to kind of change my life, and so I went to Austin Community College at night and worked construction during the day and a couple of other jobs. And so I kind of picked myself up on my bootstraps and really realized that if I was truly called to be a priest, then I was going to have to get through college to get on the other side so that I could go to seminary. And so what I did was go to art school. And the reason why I went to art school was that I thought I was a pretty decent artist. People said that I was a pretty decent artist. And I thought, hey, I don't have to take math if I can. This is Lent, you can't lie. Sean Connery's words there, right? So after taking trigonometry 3 times, fine arts was the place for me. And so I went to art school and just fell in love. And one of the things I fell in love with was art history, of course, and was quite surprised to learn of the intertwining history or intermingling of the divine and the historic movement of art through the ages. Of course, I was just a kid, so I hadn't really thought of all that, but it was a wonderful thing. We would sit in this crowded room, and we just pile in before the test. The room was like a closet, probably about as big as 4 of these tables put together. And we would sit there and just look at slide after slide, because you had to be able to recognize the painting by the artist's strokes and how they did. So you would go through these movements of history, and you would have to know which Doric capital that was in Rome, or you'd have to learn all of the paintings and which masters did which, and how do you know the difference between Cezanne and the other impressionists. So you had it was just constant, just bombarding with these images, beauty after beauty after beauty after beauty after beauty. And it was a wonderful life to live, to be immersed in the beautiful. And then to spend the time that you weren't in that crowded room memorizing the slides, in studio, in painting and in ceramics and photography, attempting to capture for one small moment something that is beautiful. I will tell you that like Christian discipleship, there is a maturation within the artist. And it is an internal dialogue. And what happens is, when you first start out, you are put in these studios. First, you get assignments. So you're in classes, just like art class in high school or elementary school. So you get these assignments, take these triangles and the squares and organize them in an interesting fashion on the page. It's just basic design skills. But as you go, you begin to be allowed freedom to express yourself, because, of course, they think in the ivory tower predominantly of art for art's sake. So it is this idea that you're going to express something inside of you. It may be leaning a little bit into expressionism, but we don't want to have too much meaning. I was studying in the middle of really the high point of the postmodern movement which was deconstructing every piece of art that had come before and putting them together in new ways on a different piece of canvas. So there's very much this deconstruction pointed way. But as I began to show my pieces, and you would go into these studios, and so we'd sit with a group about as big as this, with about 12 people in your class, who will have been working for a week or two, and you put your piece of painting up there for them to say. You learn really quick how to take criticism. And I'll never, well, why'd you do that? Well, I don't know why I did that. Yeah, I have no clue. And they would challenge you to figure out why you did it. And so the conversation externally began to mimic what was supposed to be happening inside. And so the conversation, as we would stand here and have this, let's just say you're the group, we'd have this conversation. What would happen over the weeks and the months and the years as you begin to realize that there is a conversation going on in your heart as an artist. And I have yet to meet an artist that does not have this. That does not have language. That does not have a relationship with their medium. That does not look and think and participate in a conversation with the Spirit, seeking to pull out and tease out what is beautiful and captivating and transcendent and speaking to something beyond ourselves. There's a film that was called American Beauty. Some of you may remember that. In that film is this short clip, which is the very best piece of the whole film, in my opinion. And it's a piece where this young man who's struggling with his own identity is captured on film, this paper bag floating in the wind. And those of you who've seen the film remember this, I'm sure. I see some nods. And it's just floating. And I have to tell you, it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Just watch it float. And as an artist, it speaks deeply to what we try to do, which is to take that internal floating, that internal spirit movement, and to project it into the world. That somehow when others see it, they may also experience it. And I would offer that I think for those that become those great pieces, they are the ones who have been able to communicate in some incredible way that which is purely invisible to ourselves. This dialogue with the divine being, which itself makes real God's Trinity. It puts into conversation, takes what's in conversation with God, who is creator, and it makes flesh through that unity with the Spirit. Art is an incarnational work. I started out with acrylics, and I did a lot of different things. I'm not good at people. The cartoon images, of course, illustrate this. But I'm not very good at people. And so I did a lot of that. You're required to do portraits in school to learn how to do that. And that was very fascinating.